Hello and welcome into a long-awaited, I would say, episode of Half Court Press, production of the Omaha World-Herald. He's Wilson Moore. I'm John Walker. And for the first time in, 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, like almost a month.
We're going to talk some hoops.
Yeah, first time in 2025.
Haven't seen you since last year. I'm so sorry.
I was going to do like one of those like sarcastic like knee slaps, but the table kind of comes over so I can't get the angle on it.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
A lot's happened since the last time we talked in this studio. For reference, for Nebraska and Creighton basketball fans, the Huskers had just gotten clobbered at Michigan State, and Creighton was about to hit the road to go play Alabama. So Huskers fans, Jays fans, as you know, a lot has happened. A lot has changed since then. But before we dive into all of that, Wilson, how the heck are you, man?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it was nice little break over the holidays. Or I guess I didn't get that much of a break because Nebraska was playing in Hawaii. I was not in Hawaii, which meant I had some late nights. I was in Minnesota, which is distinctly not Hawaii, but
especially this time of year.
But it was good. It's just I guess for a few days after that I was able to just kind of relax a little bit, so it was nice.
And then you celebrated a birthday.
I did celebrate a birthday.
So actually this is gonna be a really funny moment in Half Court Press lore, because I have a birthday gift and I think you'll laugh at it. You can probably tell what it is.
I have an educated guess. Oh, my God.
For anybody not watching this here podcast, which you should at omaha.com, what'd you get, Wilson?
It's a box of saltines. I have like 7 of these now.
A box of saltines? Why would you get a box of saltines for your birthday?
Because I'm an enthusiast of saltines. So, okay, a long story that I'll tell as quickly as possible here. Over the summer, Amy Just, who I'm sure listeners of this podcast are familiar with her work at the Lincoln Journal-Star, tweeted out something like, if you had like an NIL deal, what would it be? And I was like, probably saltines, which I was like half joking, but that just became a running like bit for several months after that, like with my softball team, and there are people who like see me be like, eat any saltines last night? And then so that led up to my birthday, during which Jacob Bigelow, who I'm sure is the one who got you in on this.
Yeah, he is. He texted me and said, hey, I want you to be in on the bit. And I said, perfect.
Got a bunch of people on the beat at various times throughout the night, like all in the pregame, to walk up to me and say, hey, happy birthday, and hand me a box of saltines. So I left PBA with 5 or 6 boxes of saltines in my backpack that night. I showed up to the arena, and some of those like restaurant 2-packs were just sitting on my seat.
Okay.
So yeah,
like just the little ones.
Okay. I gave some of those away because I had a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's good.
So yeah, now I can't believe this bit is still going. Apparently.
Yeah. of course. And now they know about it.
Yeah. Now everyone knows.
Yeah.
But John, thank you.
So happy belated birthday.
Thank you. And thank you for the birthday present. These will go in my cupboard next to all of the other boxes of saltines. I will get to these at some point in the next, 6 months.
You're going to eat a lot of chili and stew and soup.
I made chili last night.
See.
It was good. I make a pretty good chili.
Started to put a dent in the saltine collection.
So yeah, I don't know. I've got lots of saltines. If anyone needs any saltines, let me know, because I have a lot of them. And in the spirit of the new year, I like to, giving. So
if you need any crackers to go with your chili, soup, stew, etc., please contact Wilson Moore.
That's right.
I went home for the holidays as well. I didn't get a lot of saltines or anything, but I popped down the road from Omaha and was in the Kansas City area because Creighton did not play. They had the game against Villanova, and then they had 10 days between games, however you want to count it. And so I got to go home for a few days and ring in the new year with some Jays basketball.
Nice, yeah.
But before we dive into go ahead.
I was gonna say, is that a segue? But
no. Before we get going on what's happened to end 2024, let's go back to what's happened since our last episode. So give you a quick roadmap that Creighton lost at Alabama. I don't know how anybody wouldn't know any of this by now, but they lost at Alabama, lost at Georgetown in a pretty egregious, ugly, self-proclaimed embarrassing loss to the still rebuilding Hoyas.
I thought that was like a head-turning loss. It
was.
That was a turn the TV on in the second half and do a double take at the scoreboard loss.
Yeah, it sure was. And then somehow, some way, in two completely different style games, the Jays beat Villanova and they beat St. John's on New Year's Eve. Nebraska, it's been more highs than lows.
Yeah.
Certainly. Because since our last episode, Nebraska hasn't lost.
They haven't.
Beat Indiana at home,
which was a gigantic win coming off of that Michigan State loss.
For a couple of reasons.
Yeah, because you think about the Big Ten has the weirdest scheduling in the country, where they have those two games and then
God bless the Big East, where it's just like a round robin and they start after. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but with the Big Ten, you do not want to be 0-2 with that break in there. That's just not, I don't think anyone can really be happy, with that. You can't be relaxed and easy if you just have that hanging over your head when you're finishing the non-conference season already behind the 8 ball in Big Ten play.
Yeah.
So that was big. Just, Big Ten wins don't grow on trees. I don't care who you're playing. And that was a very flawed Indiana team once again, probably not as good as they were supposed to be going into the season, but just to beat them, beat them physically, which is really important against a team as big and burly as Indiana with Umar Ballo, and they've got some big guards too. To play the way Nebraska did, where Berke Buchtengel got rebounds on the first 2 possessions that felt like just those quietly tone-setting plays, after they just got thrashed on the boards a few days earlier. That was a big, big win for Nebraska. And then it led into Hawaii, where Nebraska... Mele Kalikimaka, Nebraska gave itself a nice Christmas present. And
then Fred Hoiberg played the ukulele.
He did. And, not too bad. The players joined in a little bit. It was... I really liked that last game. The coaching staff and support staff were all wearing pink Hawaiian shirts on the sideline. It looked good.
That trip. We see these MTEs go two entirely different ways for teams. You could be a back-to-back national champion like UConn is, and go lose 3 games by a combined 5 points or whatever it was, or the first 2 games by 2 points. I don't even remember how much they lost the third game by. But that was in Maui, I believe.
Yeah.
And Creighton obviously had its struggles in Vegas. Nowhere near the same fields.
No.
I want to make that very clear. But still, nonetheless, good for Nebraska to be able to go all the way to Hawaii and come back with its first MTE championship since
the 90s. 2000. Dylan's nodding. The 90s, in San Juan. I know. It's been a while. It's been since longer than anyone on the team has been alive.
So one, they get that. They come home with hardware. 2, we've talked about this since the beginning of the season. The non-con schedule for Nebraska probably won't be as long as Fred's there. Super grueling.
No.
Just because of the nature the way that he rebuilds teams through the portal and gives them time to get ramped up. And so for them to get 3 wins, no matter who those were against, obviously, pretty big for the Huskers.
Yeah, it was. They took care of business. They were supposed to win that tournament, and they did. And it turned, when you think of everything in the context of how does this help Nebraska make the tournament, a couple, Oregon State, good team. And Nebraska has a neutral site win over them, which it was one of those when they played, it was quad 1. But then the Oregon State's loss bumped it to quad 2, so it'll probably be a quad 2 win. That's pretty good for non-conference.
In Nebraska's non-con schedule, you'll take a quad 2 win for sure.
Hawaii is not a particularly good team, but that's a true road win. Nebraska doesn't have many opportunities for those in non-conference play, and that was a pretty good one for them. So just taking care of business. I think it kind of improved their metrics. Just I think they were.
I think so.
Just double-digit wins. Taking. Beating teams they're supposed to beat, which has been kind of a staple of Nebraska these past couple of years. Like you said, they haven't scheduled very hard in the non-con, but they've done what they need to do.
Absolutely.
They haven't had like an egregious loss in either of these past 2 seasons, and that's big when you schedule the way they do.
Yeah, so they are 40th in the net right now and 38th in KenPom.
Yeah, that's about where they were last year for like most of the season.
That'll play.
Yeah, that will.
You'd like to think that they do enough in Big Ten play to stay right around there. Yeah. And I think usually that 40 is a really good cutoff to be at for Selection Sunday.
Yeah.
Anything lower than that, especially the low 40s, well, you're in trouble. You're gonna ask for some help.
Yeah, and I think Nebraska's at a point where 10-10, 11-9 probably puts you in pretty good in Big Ten play. Probably puts you in pretty good position.
I'd say so, but they're fully on to Big Ten play, just as Creighton's on to fully on to Big East play, because the Jays are done with non-con, as are the Huskers, because they closed with Southern. Or do they still have one more?
Nope, they closed with Southern. They played UCLA. I realized something else that happened since the last time we recorded. We haven't discussed Fedor Zugic.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, doesn't that feel like a million years ago?
Yeah, it does. It sure does. So I want to give some story behind the story here. So I was at the barber shop. I was in the chair. And my barber stepped away to take a phone call to book another appointment. Yeah. And I was like, I'll scroll through my phone for a second. So I refreshed Twitter. Yeah. And literally the Creighton announcement, the Creighton tweet said 3 seconds.
Wow.
So I refreshed as they posted it.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. And so my barber came back over and I said, I'm gonna need a minute. I'm gonna need a minute because this just went down. Yeah. Thankfully, didn't expect it at all.
Did you have a pre-write?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
Figured. Yeah.
So it was fine, but a big shock to myself, to Fedor Zugic, and to Creighton.
The NCAA is so weird.
Yeah,
it's one of the strangest institutions we have in this country.
Yeah. So huge. Just to touch on him real quick, he looked so uncomfortable. Yeah.
Which probably to be expected. Right?
He hadn't played a live basketball game in 8 months, 7 months, 8 months. And that game was not played in the United States. You know what I mean? Entirely new experience. And he looked terribly, painfully uncomfortable against Villanova. He had just been cleared hours earlier. And he looked a lot better in the win over St. John's. Still played limited minutes, obviously, but I think Greg McDermott said that he didn't look fearful. He didn't look scared. It looked like Fedor Zugic was just playing basketball, which right now is really all they can ask for him, because this fact of the matter kind of went indifferent with the Creighton fan base. Half the fan base understood, half the fan base didn't. I'm not here to clarify one way or the other, but the fact of the matter is Creighton was operating and had been operating under the impression that Fedor Zugic probably wasn't getting cleared this year. For whatever reason or the other, one reason or another, they were operating under the impression that he wasn't going to get cleared this year. So he hadn't been practicing with the starters because Greg McDermott didn't want this guy practicing with the starters.
Taking reps away from people who he thought would need
it. Exactly. So it's going to take time. It's going to be a process. Mac has said that. Fedor said it. it's clear to anyone who's watched. But they're optimistic that he could have a significant part on this team by the end of the season. We'll see if that happens. I think, obviously, with every game that passes, he'll settle in and get more comfortable. But just kind of is what it was, you know. Hadn't practiced with the starters, is now, obviously. So Creighton gets another piece that it badly needed, and I was in the barber shop when it happened. But yeah, completely forgot because it felt like an eternity ago.
Yeah.
Felt like that happened like last year.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
How many of these? We're at
so
2
sorry.
now.
I'm so sorry. Let's see how many more I can get going. Yeah, we'll see. But through this stretch, Wilson, is there anything that you've mainly taken away from Nebraska? Like, has there been a consistent thing? Is there anything that's caught your eye? Anything that the Huskers either need to keep doing or start doing or stop doing as they head into 2025?
Stop doing turning the ball over. That's even in their wins. That's been kind of an issue. Double-digit turnovers against Southern.
Creighton's too.
Yeah, and that'll be big against UCLA because UCLA is the number 1 turnover-causing defense in the country.
Dang.
Yeah.
Shout out Mick Cronin, I guess.
Yeah. But I think what's really becoming clear is how different this team is from last year's team.
Yeah.
I'm going to use a Fred Hoiberg talking point here.
A Fredism.
A Fredism.
A Hoibergism. Yeah. We got to workshop that.
Yeah, we can work on it.
We'll come up with something.
Because he talks about this a lot, and probably really starting after the Creighton game. I very distinctly remember him saying it. He said it several times since then, that this is a team that needs to hang its hat on the defensive end. This is not a finesse team like they were last year. You know, Keisei Tominaga isn't walking through that door. Yeah. You know, they're not going to be the prolific three-point shooting team on most nights. They certainly have some guys who can heat up.
Sure.
Connor Esijan went on another one of his heaters the other night. But as Fred Hoiberg has said, Nebraska needs to be the team that is tougher and grittier than its opponent, that plays hard on defense, gets after it on the glass. So we're seeing that. Yeah. And I think the other big difference is last year, there were a lot of different guys who could carry the scoring load on a given night. Obviously, Keisei, Bryce Williams, Rink Mass scored 34 against Ohio State. Jamarcus Lawrence had his moment. C.J. Wilcher.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
That Rink Mass game.
Yeah.
34.
I bet he hit 5 3-pointers that game. He was getting after it. C.J. Wilcher had, I think, maybe heated up more than – I don't think anyone was hotter at any point than he was against Wisconsin in the second half against Wisconsin.
Correct.
So with all that said of last year's team, the difference in this year's team is now the Huskers need Bryce Williams to be the guy 85% of the time.
Yeah.
There are other guys who can pick it up. Connor Esijan, there will be games this conference season where he just goes off and goes crazy from 3. I still think Berke Buchtengel is kind of scratching the surface of what he can do offensively. But, Jawan Gary will have nights. There are Jawan Gary games, But I think for the most part, Nebraska needs Bryce Williams night in, night out to be the dude. He talked about that this afternoon, how that shift has gone on in his mind of kind of the mentality shift of last year. He's playing a lot of point guard, trying to get guys involved. If Keisei's hot, feed him. If Rink's got it working on the block, feed him. And if you're open, shoot the ball. Shoot the ball. Now it's, okay, Bryce Williams needs to average 18 to 20 points a game for Nebraska to generally be competitive.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either.
No.
I don't like it's let's look at last year's Creighton really quick. If Stephen Ashworth had a bad game, well, you still have Baylor, Trey, and Kalk. And if Trey has a bad game, well, you still have Baylor, Ashworth, and Kalk, and interchangeably. Yeah. And then they'd get occasional production. Mason Miller would hit a couple of threes, and Francisco Farabello would contribute a few hard-nosed minutes off the bench. It's okay to not have that. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to operate in a manner where you have a guy, like the guy. And not that Bryce Williams is like Trey Young in his 1 year at Oklahoma. But that's like one of the examples that always comes to mind. Cade Cunningham at Oklahoma State a couple years later. Like, you can fully function with a guy if you know how to use the guy. And I think it's been somewhat of a perfect marriage between Nebraska's identity this year, especially, and how Bryce Williams plays this game.
Because
and so it works.
And
for him to be the guy, it works for this Nebraska team.
He's a different guy than he was last year. Last year he was much more of a spot-up shooter. This year he has been getting downhill, getting to the rim a lot more, getting to the free throw line. I think he got some reps with that. Just, I think a common misconception about Nebraska's team last year was that Casey was like the single go-to guy. When the other team, when the other team had scored 8 straight points and Nebraska's on the road and the crowd's getting into it and they need a bucket, that was Bryce time last year. I remember it really distinctly against Indiana when they had cut like a 20-point deficit to 5 and Assembly Hall's rocking, and Bryce just goes to work, gets to a spot in the mid-range, and kind of stops the bleeding. Bryce was the guy they called on in situations like that this year, and he is that even more so this season.
Yeah, I think so. And